Welcome to The Deep Dive, the show where we really dig into some fascinating sources and pull out the key insights, the nuggets of knowledge, all to help you get up to speed fast.
Yep, cutting through the noise.
Exactly. So today we're diving into something, well, really fundamental. What actually drives you, your day-to-day? What makes you chase that goal, feel motivated, or get that satisfaction when you finally achieve something?
Right, most people think it's about the prize, the thing at the end.
Yeah, getting what you want. But what if the real driver, this like universal chemical thing, isn't actually about having it? What if it's something deeper, more about the drive itself?
It's easy to just drift, right?
Yeah.
Driven by these urges. But yeah, what if there's this powerful molecule kind of pulling the strings, dictating desire, the chase, even your mood?
That is exactly what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Dopamine. And look, if you think you know dopamine, the pleasure chemical, get ready for some real surprises, some aha moments.
Definitely some myths to bust there.
For sure. So our mission today for this deep dive is to unpack what dopamine really does, get past those common myths, and give you some practical insights, tools even, to maybe leverage this molecule for, better motivation, focus, and just, well, feeling better overall.
And to do that, we've gone through quite a stack of sources. We're talking neuroscience research, the real nitty-gritty stuff on dopamine's function, studies on the brain pathways.
The highways, yeah.
Exactly, the highways, and also some really compelling real-world examples that show just how much impact it has. We want to connect the dots for you between the complex science and, like, your everyday life.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning. When we hear dopamine, yeah, we think pleasure, maybe a quick buzz.
Yeah.
But it's obviously way more than just a feeling. What is this chemical, really?
That's the perfect place to start. So think of dopamine as a super specialized messenger. A chemical messenger works in your brain and your body. And it's actually built from something pretty common, amino acid called tyrosine. You already have it. Your body then takes that tyrosine, does a couple of steps, converts it, tweaks it, and you get this incredibly powerful molecule.
Tyrosine, got it.
And what's really fascinating is its double life. Kind of. It acts as a neurotransmitter made right in the brain, helping neurons talk to each other. But it's also released as a hormone out into your bloodstream. It plays a role in the whole fight-or-flight response.
Wow, so it's working locally in the brain and systemically in the body.
Exactly. Multiple levels, from neuron to neuron whispers to whole body alerts.
Incredible that one molecule does all that. And I mean, we haven't known about this forever, right? There's a history here.
Yeah, it was first made in a lab, synthesized way back in 1910. But figuring out its job as a neurotransmitter, that critical brain function, that didn't really happen until 1958. Big breakthrough, thanks in part to Nobel laureate Arvid Carlsson.
So decades of figuring it out. And one of the biggest things, like you said, is this mislabeling. Pleasure chemical. What's the main thing people misunderstand?
It's definitely the most common myth. Its main job, psychologically speaking, isn't really the pleasure itself. It's more about motivation, drive, craving. It's the gas in the tank that fuels the pursuit of rewards.
Okay.
Not just the enjoyment when you get there. Think of it less like the trophy and more like the engine and the map getting you to the trophy. It keeps you pointed towards what you want or need.
So it's the wanting, the anticipation, maybe more than the having or the liking. That totally changes how you think about it. And you also call that a neuromodulator. How's that different from a standard neurotransmitter?
Right. That's a really key difference. So your classic neurotransmitter, it's like a quick direct message, a whisper between two specific neurons, one-to-one. Neuromodulators, like dopamine, are different. They're more like turning up or down the volume for a whole section of the orchestra. They influence the coordinated activity of lots of neurons, hundreds, maybe thousands at once. They change the odds that whole circuits will fire up or quiet down.
So less like a direct phone call, more like a broadcast signal changing the whole mood of the room.
Exactly. That broad influence is why dopamine can shift your energy, sure, but also your whole way of thinking, your focus, your willingness to act.
And it can do this in different ways, like locally or more broadly.
Precisely. It can be released very precisely, like that whisper between two neurons, that's synaptic release. Or it can do something called volumetric release. Think of that as like dumping a whole bucket of dopamine out, affecting thousands of cells nearby.
Bucket dump, okay.
Yeah, so its effects can be super targeted or really widespread. It depends on the context, the brain area. It can fine-tune things or make big sweeping changes.
And the effects aren't always instant, right? You mentioned something about how it works.
Right. It mainly works through these receptors called G protein-coupled receptors, or GPCRs. Now, this system is a bit slower than some other neuron communication methods,
Lord,
but the effects can be really long-lasting. These GPCRs set off this chain reaction inside the cell, a cascade, that can influence things for minutes, hours, maybe even longer. It can subtly change things like which genes get turned on or off, how the cell responds to future signals.
wow. Gene expression, that's deep.
It is. And another important piece, the neurons releasing dopamine often release glutamate at the same time. Glutamate's the main excitatory neurotransmitter. It wakes things up. So you get the dopamine driving motivation, plus glutamate boosting alertness, kind of making you look outwards, focus on the external world, pursue those goals.
It's just amazing to think about this tiny molecule having such a massive impact from like one single thought to your whole body's drive. But okay, let's bring it back. Beyond the cool science, what does this all mean for you listening right now? How does this blueprint actually play out in how you feel and act?
It's absolutely core to your drive, your dopamine levels. They're pretty much the main thing determining how motivated you feel, how excited, how willing you are to, you know, lean into life and go after things.
So if you're feeling flat, unmotivated,
That's often a low dopamine state, yeah. If you're feeling energized, driven, maybe even a bit anxious, but like excited, anxious, that's likely a higher dopamine state. It really is this universal currency for pushing us towards goals. Its presence or absence deeply shapes your mood right now, your motivation, your general get up and go.
that's powerful. So, okay, this molecule is incredibly versatile. It must have specific routes it takes in the brain, right? These highways you mentioned.
Exactly. Think of them as the brain's major dopamine superhighways. Now, there are technically about 4 main ones, but for understanding the big impacts on our daily lives, we usually focus on 2 primary pathways. They have really profound effects.
Okay, lay them on us. What's the first one?
The first one is the mesocorticolimbic pathway. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Meso.cortico.limbic. Got it.
Right. This one starts in a spot called the ventral tegmental area, the VTA. Think of it like a key dopamine factory deep in your midbrain.
Okay, the VTA factory.
From there, the highway goes to the ventral striatum that includes the famous nucleus accumbens, often called the brain's reward center, and it also reaches up to the prefrontal cortex. That's your planning, decision-making hub.
So, VTA to reward center and planning center. What's this highway mainly for?
This is the big one for reward, motivation, drive, craving. It's the pathway that gets seriously hijacked in addiction. Cocaine, meth, they powerfully stimulate this pathway, but crucially, it's also firing during totally normal, healthy stuff.
Like what?
Like the drive you feel studying for an exam, the excitement pursuing a new relationship, that final push when you're running a race. It's the fundamental reward and motivation circuit in, well, pretty much all mammals.
Okay, so it drives us towards things we find rewarding, good or bad. What's the second major pathway?
The second one is the nigrostriatal pathway. This one starts in the substantia nigra. It literally means black substance because the cells look dark.
Cool name.
Yeah. And it connects to a different part of the striatum, the dorsal striatum. This pathway is absolutely essential for controlling movement, physical action.
Movement, okay. And when these highways have problems, like roadblocks or damage, the effects are pretty dramatic, right? Especially with movement disorders.
Absolutely devastating, often, that nigrostriatal pathway. It's directly involved in things like Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia. What happens is the dopamine neurons in the substantia nigra start to die off.
And the result is?
The result is the tremors, the shaky movements, the problems with speech, that really profound difficulty just starting a movement. Getting out of a chair can become a huge challenge. It's truly heartbreaking.
Yeah. And you shared a couple of really powerful stories before that. I mean, they really hammer home how critical dopamine is. One was tragic, the MPTP incident.
Yeah, it's a really sobering, stark example from the 80s. There was this group of young opioid users who accidentally took drugs contaminated with something called MPTP.
What did MPTP do?
It selectively and irreversibly killed dopamine neurons in both pathways, the movement one and the motivation one. The poor individuals who took it became completely paralyzed, couldn't move, had zero motivation, just frozen, locked in. It was a horrifying demonstration of what happens when dopamine is just gone.
Just devastating. And you had your own, thankfully, temporary experience with plummeting dopamine levels.
Yes. Much less severe, obviously, and temporary, thank goodness. But I was once given Thorazine in an ER. It's an older antipsychotic that blocks dopamine receptors, and I just plunged into this overwhelming state of depression and sadness. It wasn't just feeling down. It was like a profound absence of any drive or positive feeling, utterly miserable.
Wow.
But then, remarkably, they gave me L-dopa, which, remember, is the direct precursor molecule your body uses to make dopamine. And within minutes, literally minutes, I felt completely fine again. Normal.
Minutes.
Yeah. It was such a clear, almost instantaneous recovery. It just drove home for me personally how fundamental dopamine is for just feeling okay, for feeling functional.
Those stories really paint a picture, from total paralysis to that deep psychological low. So clearly, these dopamine pathways aren't just about moving your body or wanting a reward. They're influencing a lot more.
Oh, absolutely. They're all interconnected. They influence movement and motivation, sure, but also those crucial executive functions: planning, making decisions, focusing your attention. Memory gets tied in too. And, of course, our overall mood. They fundamentally shape how we engage with the world.
Okay, so if dopamine is this powerful motivator, this driver, then the common idea, getting a dopamine hit, that sounds like it should be a good thing, right? Like, yes, got my dopamine hit from that chocolate. But you're saying that whole concept is, well, kind of wrong.
It is, yeah. It's one of the biggest and honestly most unhelpful myths out there. There isn't really such a thing as just a simple isolated dopamine hit. The way the system actually works is you have a baseline level of dopamine. Yeah, like your average day-to-day level that's always kind of circulating. That baseline pretty much sets your general mood, your energy, your background level of motivation. Then on top of that baseline, you get peaks when you do or experience something rewarding or pleasurable.
Okay, baseline and peaks. That makes sense. But here's the part that blew my mind when I first learned it, the counterintuitive bit. When you get that big peak from something really desirable, what happens next isn't great for your baseline.
Exactly. This is the critical part people miss. After that peak, your dopamine baseline doesn't just return to normal. It actually drops below where it started.
Below baseline.
Yep. And the higher the peak, the bigger the subsequent drop below baseline. This explains a lot of common experiences. Think about that feeling after a huge success, a graduation, a big project completion, even a fantastic vacation. Sometimes there's this dip afterwards, almost like a postpartum feeling, even if it's not actual postpartum depression.
The after-party blues.
Kind of, yeah. That initial high is followed by this trough. It also explains why doing the same enjoyable thing over and over, eating your favorite food every day, scrolling the same social media feed, starts to feel less good. It loses its edge.
Right, it's not as exciting.
That's because your baseline dopamine has likely dropped a bit from those repeated peaks, so you need a bigger stimulus to get the same feeling. Your threshold for enjoyment goes up.
Wow. So chasing those big peaks all the time actually makes it harder to feel good from anything over time. And you use this analogy of dopamine as a single currency. How does that help explain this?
It's a really useful way to think about it. You only have one dopamine bank account in your brain. It doesn't matter if you're getting dopamine from food or exercise or social media likes or alcohol or work success. It's all drawing from the same account.
Okay.
So if you're constantly spiking your dopamine with lots of different things throughout the day, layering them on top of each other, you're essentially making constant withdrawals. This can lead to your overall baseline level just gradually dropping lower and lower.
And you might not even notice it at first.
Exactly. That's the insidious part. The drops can be small, subtle, day by day, until you get this point, this threshold where you suddenly feel burnt out or chronically low energy or just nothing feels that fun or motivating anymore. You feel like, ugh, nothing's working.
And that sounds exactly like the road to addiction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Needing more and more just to feel okay.
It's precisely the mechanism. Addiction, in many ways, is this progressive narrowing of the things that bring you pleasure. As someone repeatedly seeks those massive dopamine spikes from a drug or a behavior, their brain adapts. The readily releasable pool of dopamine, the stuff that's ready to go, it gets depleted.
But they feel lousy.
They feel lousy, their baseline is low, and the only thing that seems to bring them back up, even temporarily, is the drug or behavior. So they chase the next hit just to feel normal or less bad. But each hit makes the baseline problem worse. It's a vicious downward spiral where the pressure fades, but the craving gets stronger.
It's really interesting to see the actual numbers, though. Like how much dopamine different things release compared to that baseline. Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, the studies using techniques like microdialysis give us some rough comparisons. So say eating chocolate you enjoy might raise dopamine about 1.5 times above your baseline.
Okay, 1.5x for chocolate.
Sex is typically around 2 times baseline. Nicotine, if you smoke it, gives a quick spike, maybe 2.5 times baseline, but it falls off fast. Cocaine is also around 2.5 times baseline.
Same as nicotine, roughly. Interesting.
Yeah, but maybe a different duration or pattern. Then you get to something like amphetamine that can cause a massive spike, maybe 10 times baseline dopamine release.
10 times. Wow.
Huge difference. And exercise, if it's something you actually enjoy, it can also raise dopamine up to 2 times baseline, similar to sex.
So what about caffeine? Coffee lovers need to know.
Caffeine's interesting. The direct increase in dopamine is pretty modest, but what caffeine does is it upregulates your dopamine receptors. It makes them more sensitive, so the dopamine you do have has a bigger effect. It amplifies the signal.
Ah, so it makes you more receptive.
Okay.
That range from 1.5x for chocolate to 10x for amphetamine really puts it in perspective. And it makes sense why layering things becomes a problem, like the pre-workout drink plus the music pumping plus the workout itself.
Exactly. That layering of multiple dopamine spiking things might feel great in the moment, but it can seriously undermine your motivation in the long run. You get this huge peak.
Which means a bigger drop afterwards.
Right, a bigger drop in your baseline. Your system cares about that difference between the peak and the baseline. If you keep artificially jacking up the peaks and consequently lowering the baseline, you make it harder and harder to get motivated for that activity or anything else without all the extra bells and whistles. You essentially train your brain to need that excessive stimulation. That's a recipe for burnout.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem. This dynamic of peaks and the subsequent baseline drop, and how chasing highs can backfire. Now let's shift to solutions. How do we manage this? How can we optimize our drive, regulate dopamine in a healthy, sustainable way? Step one seems to be getting that baseline back up. People talk about dopamine fasting. What's the real deal with that?
Right, dopamine fasting. The term itself is a bit misleading. You can't really fast from dopamine. You need it to live, to move, to think.
Okay, cool.
But dopamine fasting 2.0, as some researchers like Dr. Anna Lemke frame it, is really about reducing impulsive compulsive behaviors. It uses principles from cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Like what kind of principles?
Things like stimulus control, basically, removing the triggers. If your phone is the problem, put it in another room, turn off notifications, make it harder to impulsively reach for it. And also exposure and response prevention, letting yourself feel the urge, the craving, but consciously choosing not to act on it.
So it's about managing the behaviors that lead to unhealthy dopamine spikes, not dopamine itself.
Exactly. It's behavior modification to let your dopamine system reset and resensitize.
You mentioned a friend who tried this.
Yeah.
Like a 30-day break.
Yeah, a friend of mine decided to do a full 30-day elimination of his main compulsive activities, smartphone use, video games, social media. He just cut them out completely.
And what happened?
The results were pretty dramatic. He found his concentration improved massively. His overall mood got significantly better. He even felt like he no longer needed the ADHD assessment his psychiatrist had been considering. It really showed that giving your dopamine circuits a break from constant overstimulation allows that baseline to recover. You have to limit the constant seeking to replenish the system.
So it's not about avoiding pleasure, but being way more intentional about it.
Oh.
Okay, besides just stopping things, what are some positive, healthy ways to leverage dopamine release? Ways that maybe don't come with that big crash.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating and practical. One powerful tool is cold water exposure.
Cold showers, ice baths, that kind of thing.
Yep. Research has shown that immersing yourself in cold water, we're talking around 14 degrees Celsius, which is about 57 Fahrenheit, for maybe 10, 15 minutes, or even up to an hour if you're adapted.
Okay, that's pretty cold.
It is. But the payoff can be huge. It can cause a sustained increase in dopamine levels up to 250%. That's 2.5 times baseline.
2.5 times. That's like cocaine levels, you said?
Similar peak height, yeah. But here's the crucial difference. Unlike cocaine, this dopamine increase from cold water is sustained. It keeps rising after you get out and stays elevated for up to 3 hours. And importantly, it doesn't seem to come with that subsequent crash below baseline.
Wow, a big boost, sustained, no crash. That sounds almost too good to be true.
It's pretty remarkable. You also get an immediate spike in norepinephrine, another alertness molecule, so you feel this unique combination of alert but also calm and focused. Great for mood, cognition, well-being. Of course, safety first, don't jump into dangerously cold water. Acclimate slowly, listen to your body. But it's a potent non-drug way to significantly boost your baseline dopamine.
That is a serious game changer. Okay, what about things we want to stick with long-term, like exercise or learning a skill or work projects? How do we keep the motivation going without it losing its edge? You mentioned intermittent reinforcement.
Yes. This is absolutely key for long-term motivation. If you constantly reward yourself in the exact same way, with the maximum dopamine spike every single time you do an activity, it will become less rewarding over time. Your brain adapts.
So mix it up.
Exactly. You need to introduce unpredictability, intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes you get the reward, sometimes you don't, or sometimes it's a big reward, sometimes small. Think about gambling slot machines work on this principle. That uncertainty keeps you hooked.
How would you apply that practically, like to a workout?
Okay, say you love listening to your favorite music during workouts because it pumps you up, that's layering dopamine. To make it intermittent, maybe before each workout, you flip a coin. Heads, you get the music. Tails, you work out in silence.
Huh. Seriously, flip a coin.
Yeah. Or just decide, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I use music. Tuesday, Thursday, I don't. That variation keeps the dopamine system guessing. It prevents the reward pathway from getting completely saturated and adapted, so the music, or whatever the reward is, retains its power when you do get it. It helps maintain that intrinsic drive for the activity itself.
That's clever, keeping the system on its toes. Okay, related to that intrinsic drive, you talk about this really powerful mental shift, learning to find pleasure in the effort itself, not just the prize at the end, this growth mindset idea.
This is probably the most powerful, sustainable strategy of all. If you only focus on the external reward, the medal, the grade, the paycheck, the dessert after the workout, you actually train your brain to disconnect dopamine release from the process of doing the hard thing.
Because dopamine anticipates the reward way out in the future.
Right. Dopamine influences our perception of time. If the reward only comes at the very end, the dopamine spike is associated only with the end, not with the struggle, the friction, the work itself. The powerful shift is to consciously attach the feeling of reward to the effort.
How do you do that? Just tell yourself, this feels good,
Yeah,
even when it feels hard.
kind of, yeah. It's about reframing it internally. When you're in the middle of that tough workout or studying something difficult or pushing through a frustrating task, you tell yourself something like, okay, this is hard. This friction, this struggle, this is what triggers the good stuff later. This effort itself is making me better, increasing my capacity, and it will lead to dopamine release. You learn to embrace the strain.
So you're sort of self-rewarding the process.
Exactly. You're hijacking the system in a positive way. You're telling your brain the effort is the reward pathway. People like David Goggins are masters of this. They've learned to thrive on the challenge itself. It builds incredible discipline and resilience because the motivation comes from within the activity, not just after it.
That's a profound shift. And does this apply to things like intermittent fasting too? Finding reward in the deprivation.
Absolutely. On one level, fasting increases the sensitivity of your dopamine receptor, so when you do eat, food tastes amazing, it's more rewarding. That's a physiological effect.
Okay.
But on a psychological level, yes, you can learn to attach reward to the act of fasting itself. By focusing on the health benefits, the discipline involved, the feeling of control, you can consciously generate dopamine release from the act of restraint. You reframe the deprivation as a positive, beneficial effort.
Fascinating. Okay, we have to talk about smartphones. They are dopamine machines, right?
Mm-hmm.
But often not in a helpful way for our baseline.
Huge dopamine drivers, yes. But the way they deliver it, constant, unpredictable notifications, endless novelty, easy access, it's perfect for lowering your baseline and fragmenting your attention. That constant layering of little dopamine hits makes it harder to focus on things that require sustained effort, and it makes those other activities feel less enjoyable by comparison.
You mentioned taking your phone out of your workouts.
Yeah, personally, that was a big one. I realized I wasn't enjoying the exercise itself as much because I was constantly checking my phone between sets. Removing it made the workout more focused and honestly more rewarding intrinsically. It's also why we need to be cautious about chronic use of prescription stimulants like Adderall or Ritalin for non-medical reasons, for just performance enhancement.
Why is that? They boost dopamine, right?
They do, massively. But chronic high-dose use, especially without a medical need, can deplete your natural dopamine stores over time and potentially limit neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to learn and adapt. It can become a crutch that ultimately makes it harder to function without it. Short-term gain, potentially long-term costs.
Okay, good caution there. It's something really positive. Social connection. How does that fit into the dopamine picture?
This is such a cool part of our biology. Turns out that oxytocin, often called the love hormone or bonding hormone, released during positive social interactions.
Like with friends, family, partners?
Exactly. Romantic bonds, close friendships, family connection. Oxytocin actually travels to the VTA, that dopamine factory we talked about, and it stimulates dopamine release there.
So connecting with people we care about is biologically rewarding via dopamine.
Yes, it's hardwired. Seeking social bonds literally triggers the same reward pathways as other things we find motivating. It underscores how fundamental connection is to our well-being. These seemingly soft social behaviors have very real, hardwired neurochemical rewards.
That's really heartening. Okay, shifting gears slightly, and again, this is purely informational. Always talk to your doctor before trying anything. What about supplements or medications that people sometimes use to try and boost dopamine?
Right, doctor consultation is essential. But for informational purposes, yes, there are things that directly impact the dopamine pathway. You have precursors, the building blocks. Mucuna pruriens is a plant, a velvety bean, that actually contains LDOPA, the direct precursor to dopamine.
So that's pretty direct action.
Very direct. It can cause a pretty intense but often short-lived increase in dopamine. The potential downside is often a significant crash afterwards, and side effects can be an issue. L-tyrosine, the amino acid we mentioned earlier, is further up the chain. It provides the raw material. Taking supplemental L-tyrosine might offer a milder, more transient boost for some people.
Milder. Okay. Any others?
There's PEA, phenethylamine. It's found in things like chocolate in small amounts. As a supplement, it can cause a very sharp but very brief spike in dopamine and norepinephrine. And then there are things that work indirectly, like huperzine A, which mainly affects acetylcholine but seems to indirectly boost dopamine in certain brain areas involved in focus.
And prescription options exist too.
Yes. Wellbutrin, the generic name is bupropion, is a prescription antidepressant that also helps people quit smoking. It works differently than SSRIs. It primarily affects dopamine and norepinephrine reuptake, but again, prescription only, under medical supervision.
And the big caution with all of these direct boosters.
The big caution is that directly manipulating dopamine with these powerful precursors or drugs often leads to that rebound effect, the crash, the depletion. They can disrupt the natural balance. And they absolutely should be approached with extreme caution or avoided altogether by anyone with a history of psychosis, bipolar disorder, mania, or even severe anxiety, as they can potentially trigger or worsen those conditions. Talk to your doctor.
Absolutely crucial advice. You mentioned caffeine earlier having that unique role of upregulating receptors rather than just spiking levels. Any specific sources?
Yeah, caffeine's unique. That receptor upregulation makes your own dopamine work better. Yerba mate is an interesting source because, besides caffeine, some research suggests compounds in it might have neuroprotective effects, potentially helping shield dopamine neurons. So you get the caffeine benefit, plus maybe some added protection.
Interesting. And one final note on supplements melatonin. People take it for sleep?
Right. Important to know that melatonin, while helpful for regulating sleep cycles for many, can actually reduce dopamine levels. So if you're focusing on optimizing your dopamine for motivation during the day, it's just something to be aware of regarding melatonin use.
Wow. Okay. What a journey through the world of dopamine. We've gone from its basic chemical identity through those brain highways.
To how it controls movement, motivation, reward.
Busted the myth of the simple dopamine hit and really dug into this crucial balance between the peaks and the baseline.
Yeah, the core idea to take away is that dopamine is this incredibly powerful force shaping your drive, your craving, your whole engagement with life. And it's all about that dynamic dance between the spikes and your underlying baseline level.
And the really empowering thing, I think, from this whole deep dive is that the system, it's not just some random chemical soup happening to you. It's largely under your control.
That's the key message. You have agency here.
Yeah. You've now got the knowledge. You've got tools, behavioral strategies like cold exposure and intermittent reinforcement, mental reframing like finding reward in effort, even awareness about supplements. With all the necessary caution, you can actually influence your dopamine system. Your choices today directly impact your dopamine levels tomorrow and your future capacity for motivation and enjoyment.
It really is about consciously designing how you engage with the world, how you pursue rewards, in a way that supports your long-term energy and well-being, instead of just constantly chasing those fleeting highs that ultimately leave you feeling depleted.
So here's something to think about as you go about your day, your week. Take a look at your own dopamine schedule. Where are you getting your hits? Are you layering things constantly? How could you maybe introduce some strategic intermittent reinforcement? Could you practice attaching that feeling of reward to the effort itself, to the friction when things get tough, instead of only focusing on the finish line? Just consider how that kind of mindful approach, that shift in perspective, could genuinely transform your ability to sustain your energy, your drive, and your motivation for things that really truly matter most to you.